22 years later, these United States would declare their independence from England. In that year, 1776, events swirled toward the American Revolution. 10,000 strong and strategically located between the colonies and the British in Canada, the Haudenosaunee were seen as a key to victory. British and American diplomats met repeatedly with representatives of the Grand Council, trying to pull the Indian nations to their side. But the Grand Council, guided by the principles of peace laid down by the Great Law, declared their neutrality. Although they would not ally with either power, in a diplomatic gesture, a delegation from the Grand Council traveled to Philadelphia. There, the Haudenosaunee, the oldest democracy in North America, officially recognized the fledgling American government. The delegation had been lodged in Independence Hall, above the chamber of the Continental Congress, where representatives were drafting the Declaration of Independence. During that same critical summer of 1776, a young Mohawk named Joseph Brant returned from England. A protege of the British agent for Indian Affairs, Sir William Johnson, Brant's family had long-standing ties to the British. Traveling among the Haudenosaunee nations, Brant passionately argued for an alliance with the British as their only hope to prevent being overrun by the Americans.
He started to go amongst the nations of the Mohawks, the Oneidas, the Onondagas, Cayugas, and Senecas, trying to entice the young men to go on the side of the British.
In an act that threatened the very existence of the Confederacy, Joseph Brant, in open defiance of the Grand Council, called a meeting in the summer of 1777 to argue the British case. Blacksnake, a young Haudenosaunee man from the Seneca Nation, listened closely.
Brant came forward and said that if we did nothing for the British, there would be no peace for us. Our throats would be cut by the Redcoat man or by America. That we should go and join the Father. This is the way for us.
Blacksnake's uncle, a respected Seneca leader named Corn Planter, rose to challenge Brant. Corn Planter was a veteran of the French and Indian Wars and had participated in the critical council decisions of his time. He wanted no part of a war that was not his to fight.
You must all mark and listen to what I have to say. War is war. Death is death. A fight is a hard business. Here America says not to lift our hands against either party. I move, therefore, to wait a little while to hear more consultation between the two parties. Let the British say everything he is going to say to us. We then can see clear where we are going and not be deceived. Corn Planter, Seneca.
In shocked disbelief, Blacksnake and the others watched as Brant rose to his feet. He ordered Corn Planter to stop speaking, then called him a coward.
The men had a great deal of controversy among themselves, with some for Brant and some for Corn Planter. They began to say that we must fight for somebody, because they could not bear to be called cowards.
The following day, the gathering, predominantly Mohawk and Seneca, broke with the Grand Council and agreed to fight with the British. Corn Planter resigned himself to the majority will and rallied his men.
Every brave man show himself now. Hereafter we will find our many dangerous times. I therefore say to you, you must stand like good soldiers against your own white brother. Because just as soon as he finds out that you are against him, he will show no mercy on us.
But as factions broke from the Grand Council, not all joined the British. The Oneida, heavily influenced by American missionaries, were moving toward an outright alliance with the Americans. The horror of civil war loomed over the Confederacy. In the midst of the American Revolution, a Haudenosaunee Civil War began. On August 6, 1777, Oneida fighting men and their American allies clashed at Oriskany Creek with British troops and their Seneca and Mohawk allies. At day's end, hundreds lay dead on the battlefield. As the war raged across the eastern continent, Mohawk and Seneca forces allied with the British wreaked havoc on frontier settlements, draining American economic and military resources away from the war effort. In retaliation, George Washington sent an army against the Haudenosaunee capital at Onondaga, one nation still clinging tenaciously to neutrality. After Washington's army ransacked the capital, the Onondaga also plunged angrily into the war on the side of the British.
You call George Washington the father of your country. We call George Washington Haudenosaunee, which means town destroyer.
In August 1779, Washington sent General John Sullivan into Haudenosaunee country with 5,000 men. Entering territory few white men had ever even seen, Sullivan carved a chilling swath of destruction, forcing those in his path to flee their homes. Sullivan's soldiers could not help but marvel at the prosperity of the deserted towns they were destroying.
We reached the town, which consisted of 128 houses, mostly very large and elegant.
The Indians live much better than most of the Mohawk River farmers. Their houses very well furnished with all necessary household utensils, great plenty of grain, several horses, cows, and wagons.
It appears to be a very old settlement. There are a great number of apple and peach trees here, which we cut down and destroyed.
A group of Haudenosaunee mercenaries who guided Sullivan's army into the territory were captured by the Seneca. One man recognized his own brother among the captives.
Brother, you have merited death. When those rebels had drove us from the fields of our fathers to seek out new homes, it was you who would dare to step forth as their pilot and conduct them to the doors of our homes to butcher our children and put us to death. No crime can be greater. But though you have merited death and shall die on this spot, my hands shall not be stained in the blood of a brother. Who will strike?
A Seneca chief killed the prisoner instantly. But even the powerful Seneca could not stand against Sullivan's massive army. Old and young grabbed what few possessions they could carry and fled.
A part of our corn they burnt, and threw the remainder into the river. They burnt our houses, killed what few cattle and horses they could find, destroyed our fruit trees, and left nothing but the bare soil. What were our feelings when we found that there was not a mouthful of any kind of sustenance left? Not even enough to keep a child one day from perishing with hunger. Dickawamis, Seneca.
In retaliation for the American destruction of Onondaga, Mohawk, Seneca, and Cayuga villages, Joseph Brant attacked the Oneida and neighboring Tuscarora, allies of the Americans. In the end, all of the 5 nations were ravaged. Out of scores of Haudenosaunee towns, only 2 survived unscathed. And it was already fall, with no way to replace the lost crops. The tragedy heightened with the coming of winter. It was the coldest in memory. Snow fell 5 feet deep. Many homeless Haudenosaunee died of hunger, cold, and disease. Less than 4 years later, in 1783, the British government surrendered at the Treaty of Paris. With no concern for the sovereignty of Indian nations, even their allies, the British ceded control of the continent as far west as the Mississippi to the new American nation.